The sound of galloping hooves split the morning silence as dust billowed behind a lone rider racing across the Arizona territory. Natalie Vance clutched her leather medical bag tighter, her heart pounding as the stagecoach station came into view through the shimmer of July heat. It was 1878, and the 23-year-old nurse had never ridden so hard in her life. "Whoa," she called, pulling back on the reins as her horse, a chestnut mare named Penny, slowed to a trot. Natalie's blonde hair had come loose from its pins, framing her face in wild disarray as she approached the weathered building that served as both stagecoach stop and telegraph office. Inside, she found exactly what she feared: 3 men with bandanas pulled up to their eyes, guns drawn. The station manager, old Mr. Wilkins, stood with his hands raised, terror etched on his weathered face. Behind the counter cowered his wife, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. Well, drawled the tallest outlaw, redirecting his pistol toward Natalie. "Looks like we got ourselves another guest." Natalie froze in the doorway, her medical bag suddenly heavy in her hands. "I'm just passing through," she said, her voice steadier than her trembling legs. "I'm a nurse heading to Tucson." The second outlaw, a man with a jagged scar across his left cheek, laughed. "A nurse, boys. And here we were wondering how we'd get Doc Patterson to patch up Ringo after that lawman shot him." "Take what you want from the safe," Natalie said cautiously. "I won't cause trouble." The third outlaw stepped forward, removing his hat to reveal greasy black hair. "Oh, you ain't causing trouble, miss. You're coming with us." "What?" "No." Natalie backed toward the door, but Scarface grabbed her arm, his fingers digging painfully into her flesh. $5,000, the tall outlaw said casually, as if discussing the weather. "That's what your daddy'll pay to get you back." Natalie's blood ran cold. "My father? I don't." "Nathan Vance owns half the copper mines in the territory," the tall one continued. "His only daughter ought to fetch a nice price." Natalie tried to wrench away. "You're mistaken." "I'm not." "Save it," Scarface hissed. "We've been watching you. Knew you'd stop here on your way to Tucson." Outside, the distant sound of approaching horses made all 3 outlaws tense. The leader peered through the dirty window. "Rider's coming. Tie her up, Wade. We're taking her with us." As Wade bound her wrists with rough rope, Natalie's mind raced. Her father had warned her about traveling alone, but she'd been stubborn, determined to prove herself as more than just a wealthy mine owner's daughter. Now her independence might cost her life. The outlaws dragged her outside just as 5 riders crested the hill. At their front rode a broad-shouldered man on a midnight black stallion, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. Even from a distance, Natalie could see his piercing gaze take in the scene. "That's far enough," called the outlaw leader, pulling Natalie against him and pressing his revolver to her temple. "We've got business with Miss Vance here, and you'd be wise to ride on." The lead rider dismounted in one fluid motion, his spurs jingling as his boots hit the dirt. When he looked up, Natalie caught her breath. His face was weathered by sun and wind, but his eyes were startlingly blue, clear as a mountain lake. A thin scar ran along his jawline, disappearing into the shadow of a day-old beard. "I reckon not," he said, his voice low and steady. "Let the lady go." The outlaw leader laughed. "And who might you be, cowboy?" "Name's Matthew Young. I'm escorting a cattle drive to Fort Bowie." Heard the commotion. He took a step forward, and Natalie noticed his right hand hovering near the holstered Colt at his hip. "Now, I'll say it once more, let her go." "We're taking her with us," the leader sneered. "Her daddy's good for $5,000. Matthew's eyes narrowed. "Then you'll have to go through me first." Time seemed to freeze as the 2 men stared each other down. The other cowboys had spread out, hands resting on their weapons. Natalie could feel the outlaw's grip tightening painfully on her arm. 5 against 3, Matthew continued calmly. "Those aren't odds I'd wager on." The tension crackled like lightning before a storm. Then, in a blur of movement, Matthew drew and fired in one smooth motion. The bullet struck the dirt at the leader's feet, sending up a spray of dust. "That was a warning," he said. "The next one won't be." The outlaw holding Natalie hesitated, then shoved her forward hard. She stumbled, falling to her knees in the dirt as the 3 men mounted their horses and spurred them into a gallop, disappearing in a cloud of dust toward the distant mountains. Matthew was at her side in an instant, cutting her bonds with a knife pulled from his boot. "Are you hurt, Miss Vance?" "No. How do you know my name?" Natalie asked, rubbing her wrists where the rope had chafed the skin raw. "Those outlaws weren't exactly whispering," he said with a slight smile that transformed his serious face. "Besides, Nathan Vance's daughter traveling to Tucson isn't exactly a secret in these parts." He helped her to her feet, his calloused hand gentle against hers. For a moment, their eyes met, and something flickered between them, a spark, a recognition that Natalie couldn't explain. "Those men," she said, breaking the silence. "They'll be back, won't they?" Matthew nodded grimly. "The Blackwell Gang doesn't give up easy. They've been raiding from here to the Mexican border for months." He glanced at the horizon where the outlaws had disappeared. "You can't continue to Tucson alone. I have to get there. There's an influenza outbreak, and they need medical help." Natalie brushed the dust from her riding skirt. "I'm a nurse, Mr. Young. People are depending on me." Admiration flashed in Matthew's eyes. "My cattle drive is headed in that direction. We can escort you." Before she could respond, one of the other cowboys rode up. "Matt, those were Blackwell's men. We should alert the sheriff in the next town." "We will," Matthew agreed. "But first, we need to get Miss Vance to safety." As the cowboys prepared to depart, Mr. Wilkins and his wife emerged from the station, shaken but unharmed. The old man pressed a canteen of water into Natalie's hands. "Be careful, Miss Vance. Those men are desperate characters." Within the hour, Natalie found herself riding alongside Matthew at the head of a small cattle herd, her medical bag secured to Penny's saddle. The 5 cowboys kept vigilant watch, scanning the horizon for any sign of pursuit. "How did you come to be a nurse?" Matthew asked as they rode, breaking the companionable silence that had settled between them. "I trained in Boston," Natalie replied. "After my mother died of typhoid when I was 16, I decided I wanted to help others." She glanced at him. "My father wanted me to stay in the East, find a suitable husband. But I couldn't ignore the need out here." Matthew nodded thoughtfully. "Takes courage to forge your own trail." "And you? Have you always been a cattleman?" A shadow passed over Matthew's face. "No. Rode with the Texas Rangers for a spell after the war. Seen enough fighting to last a lifetime." He adjusted his hat against the sun. "Cattle's simpler. They don't shoot back." As the day wore on, Natalie found herself increasingly drawn to the quiet cowboy. There was a depth to Matthew Young that intrigued her, a gentleness belied by his rugged exterior. When they made camp that evening by a small creek, she watched him care for his horse with the same attention she'd give a patient. After a simple dinner of beans and jerky, Natalie sat by the fire, allowing its warmth to chase away the chill of desert night. Matthew settled beside her, offering a tin cup of coffee. "Thank you," she said, accepting it gratefully. "Not just for the coffee, for everything today." His eyes reflected the dancing flames. Any decent man would have done the same. "Perhaps," Natalie murmured. But not every man would have stood against 3 armed outlaws with such conviction. Matthew studied the darkness beyond the firelight. Those men, they're the worst kind of predators. They prey on the vulnerable, thinking only of what they can take. His jaw tightened. "I've seen what happens when good people stand aside." Natalie sensed there was more to his story, but she didn't press. Instead, she asked, "Do you think they'll come after us?" "Yes," he answered honestly. "Blackwell's not one to let $5,000 right away. But we'll reach Bisbee by tomorrow afternoon. Sheriff Palmer there is an old friend. He'll send a telegraph to your father and arrange proper protection for the rest of your journey." Natalie's fingers tightened around the warm cup. "I don't want my father involved. He'll only insist I return home. With respect, Miss Vance, he should be warned. These men know who you are." She sighed, knowing he was right. "I've spent my whole life trying to prove I'm more than Nathan Vance's daughter, that I have something valuable to contribute beyond my family name." Matthew's expression softened. "From what I've seen today, you don't have anything to prove." Their conversation was interrupted by a cowboy on watch calling Matthew's name. Instantly alert, Matthew rose, hand on his pistol. "Stay here," he told Natalie before disappearing into the darkness. Tense minutes passed before he returned, his expression grave. "Someone's following us. Could be Blackwell's men, could be Apache. Either way, we're breaking camp early. We ride at first light." They left before dawn, traveling hard through terrain that grew increasingly rugged. By mid-morning, Natalie's muscles ached from the relentless pace, but she didn't complain. Matthew rode close beside her, occasionally scanning the horizon with a brass spyglass. "There," he said suddenly, pointing to a distant ridge where 3 riders had appeared silhouetted against the sky. "That's them." Natalie felt her heart race. "They're following us." "And gaining," Matthew confirmed grimly. "The herd's slowing us down." He turned to one of his men. "Jim, take the cattle on to Fort Bowie with Pete and Charlie. Frank, you're with me and Miss Vance. We'll make for Bisbee, it's closer." As the herd continued south with 3 cowboys, Matthew led Natalie and Frank on a more easterly route, pushing their horses as fast as the rocky terrain would allow. By midday, the outlaws had closed the distance considerably. "There's an old mining cabin about 2 miles ahead," Matthew called over the pounding of hooves. "We might make our stand there." They reached the abandoned cabin just as the first shots rang out, bullets kicking up dust at their horses' hooves. Matthew helped Natalie dismount and ushered her inside the weathered structure while Frank took the horses around back. "Stay down," Matthew ordered, positioning himself at a window with his rifle. Frank returned moments later, setting his own weapon beside a second window. The outlaws approached cautiously, spreading out to surround the cabin. Natalie counted 5 of them, now the original 3 joined by 2 more. "That's far enough, Blackwell," Matthew called out. "We've got a defensible position and enough ammunition to last a week." The outlaw leader Blackwell reined in his horse. "All we want is the girl, young. Hand her over, and you can ride away." "Not happening." Matthew's voice was iron. A tense silence followed, broken by the sharp crack of a rifle from the hillside behind the cabin. Frank cried out, clutching his shoulder as blood blossomed across his shirt. "They've got men in the hills." Matthew shouted, moving to help Frank to the floor. Natalie was already there, ripping open Frank's shirt to examine the wound. The bullet went through clean, she assessed quickly, reaching for her medical bag. "I need clean water and something for bandages." While Matthew provided cover fire, Natalie worked swiftly to stop the bleeding and dress Frank's wound. Outside, the outlaws continued their assault, bullets splintering the wooden walls. "You've done this before," Matthew observed, momentarily crouching beside her. "Too many times," she replied, tying off the bandage. "He needs proper medical attention, but this will hold for now." A bullet shattered the window above them, sending glass shards raining down. Matthew shielded Natalie with his body, and she felt his heartbeat strong against her. "We can't stay here," he said, his face inches from hers. "They'll rush us after dark." Their eyes met, and in that moment of danger, Natalie recognized something in Matthew's gaze that mirrored her own feelings, a connection forged in crisis, but rooted in something deeper. "There's a back way out," Frank said through gritted teeth. "Mining tunnel under the floorboards. Might lead to the next ridge." Matthew moved to the corner, pulling up loose boards to reveal a dark passage below. "Frank's right. This could be our way out." He turned to Natalie. "It'll be tight and dark. Are you afraid of confined spaces?" She shook her head. "Not when the alternative is being shot." Matthew's smile was brief but genuine. "Let me check it first." He lowered himself into the tunnel, disappearing for several minutes before returning, his face streaked with dirt. "It's clear enough." "Comes out about half a mile away, behind some boulders." They helped Frank to his feet, and Matthew went down first, then reached up to help Natalie. The tunnel was narrow, forcing them to crawl in some places, but it was their only chance. Behind them, they could hear the outlaws' continued gunfire, unaware that their quarry was escaping. They emerged from the tunnel into the late afternoon sun, hidden from view by a cluster of large rocks. In the distance, they could hear the gunfire continuing at the cabin. "They don't know we've gone," Matthew whispered. "But they will soon enough." Frank leaned heavily against a boulder, his face pale. "Leave me here with one of the rifles. I'll cover your escape." "No man gets left behind," Matthew said firmly. "We all go together." Helping Frank between them, they made their way cautiously along the ridge, staying low to avoid being spotted. They had gone perhaps half a mile when the shooting at the cabin suddenly ceased. "They've realized we're gone," Natalie said, fear evident in her voice. "And they'll be tracking us soon," Matthew agreed. "We need horses." As if in answer to their prayers, they spotted a small ranch in the valley below. "Harris Place," Frank identified. "Good people. They'll help." The sun was setting as they reached the ranch, a modest operation with a small cabin and corral. An older man emerged at their approach, shotgun ready, until he recognized Frank. Frank Miller? What in tarnation? Trouble, Mr. Harris, Matthew interrupted. Blackwell Gang. Frank's been shot, and they're after Miss Vance here. Harris lowered his weapon. Come inside, quick. Martha, he called to his wife. We got injured. Within minutes, they were inside the cabin, where Martha Harris, a kindly woman with gray streaked hair, helped Natalie tend to Frank's wound. Meanwhile, Matthew and Harris discussed their options. Bisbee's still 15 miles southeast, Harris said, but Blackwell's likely to have men watching the main trails. What about the old Spanish mission route? Matthew suggested. It's longer, but less traveled. Harris nodded thoughtfully. Might work. I've got fresh horses you can take. As night fell, Natalie found herself alone with Matthew on the small porch. Inside, Frank rested under Martha's watchful eye. We'll leave at first light, Matthew said, his voice low. Frank will stay here until he's fit to travel. Natalie wrapped her shawl tighter against the cool night air. I feel responsible for all this. If I hadn't been so stubborn about traveling alone, don't. Matthew interrupted gently. You couldn't have known. But 3 men are risking their lives for me. And for what? Because my father has money? She turned to face him, moonlight illuminating the troubled expression on her face. Is that all I'm worth? A ransom? Matthew's hand found hers in the darkness. You know that's not true. I've seen you with Frank how you care for people. That's worth more than any ransom. His touch was warm, comforting. Natalie found herself drawing closer to him, taking strength from his presence. Why did you really help me, Matthew? She asked softly. You could have ridden away at that stagecoach station. You didn't know me. He was silent for a long moment. 5 years ago, I was escorting a family to Santa Fe, husband, wife, 2 children. We were attacked by raiders. I fought them off, but... His voice faltered. I couldn't save them all. The wife and daughter were taken. By the time we found them, it was too late. Natalie's heart ached for him. It wasn't your fault. Maybe not, he conceded. But I swore I'd never stand by again if I could help. His eyes found hers in the moonlight. When I saw you with that gun to your head, I didn't see a rich man's daughter. I saw someone who needed help, someone worth fighting for. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition, a connection deeper than their shared danger. Natalie felt herself drawn to this man who carried such pain yet retained such compassion. Without thinking, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle, questioning, and to her surprise, he responded with equal tenderness. When they parted, Natalie saw wonder in his eyes, mirroring her own feelings. I shouldn't have, she began. I'm glad you did, he interrupted softly. A sound from inside the cabin broke the moment. Matthew's expression shifted back to vigilance. We should rest. Tomorrow will be a long day. They departed at dawn, mounted on Harris's horses, taking the little-used trail that wound through scrubland and rocky passes. Matthew rode close to Natalie, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. How much farther? Natalie asked as the sun climbed higher in the sky. We should reach Bisbee by noon, Matthew replied. Once we're there, Sheriff Palmer will. He stopped abruptly, raising his hand in warning. Ahead, where the trail narrowed between 2 rocky outcroppings, dust rose as if from approaching riders. Back, Matthew hissed, turning his horse. Quickly, they retreated to a small grove of cottonwoods near a shallow creek. Matthew dismounted, helping Natalie down. Stay here with the horses. I'm going to scout ahead. No, Natalie protested, gripping his arm. Don't leave me. The concern in her eyes touched him. I'll be careful, he promised, his hand briefly covering hers. If I'm not back in 15 minutes, ride east until you hit the main road to Bisbee. Don't stop for anyone. Natalie watched him disappear among the rocks, her heart pounding with fear not just for herself, but for him. In the short time she'd known Matthew Young, he had become important to her in ways she hadn't thought possible. The minutes stretched like hours. Natalie strained to hear any sound over the gentle babbling of the creek. When a twig snapped nearby, she whirled around, clutching the small derringer Matthew had given her for protection. It's just me, Matthew said softly, emerging from the brush. Relief flooded through her. Blackwell and 3 men, he reported grimly. They're watching the trail ahead. What do we do? There's another way, an old Apache trail that runs along the ridge. It's treacherous, but it might be our only chance. They led their horses up a steep incline, following a barely visible path that wound precariously along the edge of a cliff. Below, they could occasionally glimpse the outlaws patrolling the main trail. How did you know about this path? Natalie asked, carefully navigating a narrow section. Tracked a mountain lion up here once, Matthew replied. Nearly broke my neck doing it. Despite the danger, Natalie found herself smiling at his casual tone. There was something about Matthew Young that made her feel safe, even with outlaws hunting them. They were nearly past the outlaws' position when Natalie's horse dislodged a small cascade of rocks. The noise echoed in the canyon below, and they froze as shouts rang out. They've spotted us. Matthew urged their horses forward as gunshots rang out, bullets ricocheting off the rocks around them. They rode hard along the ridge, the path widening as it descended toward more level ground. Behind them, they could hear the outlaws scrambling to pursue. There, Matthew pointed ahead to where the town of Bisbee nestled in the valley, its buildings growing closer with each passing moment. They thundered into town, drawing curious stares from townspeople as they raced toward the sheriff's office. Matthew swung from his saddle before his horse had fully stopped, helping Natalie down. "Sheriff Palmer," he called, bursting through the door with Natalie at his side. "Blackwell Gang's right behind us." The sheriff, a grizzled veteran with a silver mustache, was on his feet instantly. "Matt Young? What the devil?" "No time," Matthew interrupted. "5 armed men after Miss Vance here, Nathan Vance's daughter. They want ransom." Palmer's eyes narrowed. "Johnson." He barked to his deputy. "Ring the alarm. Get every able man with a gun to the north edge of town." He turned back to Matthew and Natalie. "You two stay here." "I'm coming with you," Matthew insisted. "I know these men." The sheriff hesitated, then nodded. "Stay close." To Natalie, he said, "Miss, you'll be safe here. Lock the door behind us." As the lawman hurried out, Matthew lingered. "Natalie," he said, using her first name for the first time. "I'll be back. I promise." She caught his hand. "Be careful, Matthew." Their eyes held for a moment, volumes spoken without words. Then he was gone, following the sheriff toward the gathering posse. Natalie paced the small office, listening to the commotion outside. From the window, she could see townspeople hurrying for cover, mothers gathering children, men with rifles taking positions. The minutes stretched painfully. Then came the gunfire, distant at first, then closer. Shouts echoed between buildings. Unable to bear the uncertainty, Natalie opened the door, peering cautiously outside. What she saw made her blood run cold. Blackwell himself was moving along the side street, separating himself from the main battle. He was heading toward the sheriff's office toward her. Natalie stepped back inside, grabbing the shotgun from the wall rack. She'd never fired one before, but her father had insisted she learn to handle a pistol for protection. How different could it be? When the door burst open, she was waiting, the shotgun leveled at Blackwell's chest. Well, the outlaw sneered, his own pistol aimed at her. "Seems we've got ourselves a standoff, Miss Vance." "Leave," Natalie ordered, struggling to keep the weapon steady. "The whole town is alerted." "They're busy with my men," Blackwell replied, taking a step forward. "Just you and me now. And I'm thinking your daddy will pay just as well for your corpse as he would for you alive." As he cocked his revolver, a shot rang out. Blackwell staggered, his face registering shock as he looked down at the blood spreading across his shirt. He turned slowly to see Matthew standing in the doorway, his smoking Colt still raised. Blackwell crumpled to the floor as Matthew rushed to Natalie. "Are you hurt?" "No," she whispered, lowering the shotgun with trembling hands. "You came back." "I promised I would." His arms encircled her, and she let herself lean into his strength, the danger finally passing. Outside, the gunfire had ceased. Sheriff Palmer appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene with a practiced eye. "Other 4 are either dead or captured," he reported. "No casualties on our side. Thank the Lord." He looked down at Blackwell's body. "Reckon that closes the book on the Blackwell Gang." In the days that followed, Natalie sent telegrams to both her father and the hospital in Tucson, explaining the situation. Her father's reply was swift. He was coming to Bisbee immediately. The hospital assured her that another nurse had arrived to help with the influenza cases. Matthew stayed in town, ostensibly to give his statement to the authorities and check on Frank, who had been brought to Bisbee by the Harris family. But Natalie knew he was waiting for her father, waiting to ensure her safety before continuing his cattle drive. They spent those days together, sharing meals at the hotel restaurant, walking through the small town, learning about each other beyond the crisis that had brought them together. Natalie told him of her dreams to establish a proper hospital in the territory. Matthew spoke of his ranch in Texas, the land he'd purchased with his cattle earnings. On the third evening, as they sat on the hotel's veranda watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold, Matthew took her hand. "Your father arrives tomorrow," he said quietly. "Yes," Natalie confirmed, feeling a sudden tightness in her chest. "He'll want me to return east." "And will you go?" She turned to face him, studying the face that had become so dear to her in such a short time. "I don't know. My work is important to me, but, he prompted gently. "But I found something else important too." She met his gaze steadily. "Someone." The hope that dawned in Matthew's eyes made her heart soar. "Natalie, I know it's sudden. We've known each other barely a week. But these days with you, they've meant more to me than I can say." "I feel it too," she confessed. "It's as if I've known you much longer." He shifted in his chair to face her fully. "I have to finish this cattle drive, it's my livelihood. But afterward." He took a deep breath. "Would you consider coming to Texas? There's a town near my ranch that sorely needs a nurse. And he faltered, then continued with quiet certainty. "I need you." Natalie's heart seemed to stop, then race ahead. "Are you asking what I think you're asking, Matthew Young?" A smile slowly spread across his face. "I reckon I am, though not very eloquently. Natalie Vance, I'm asking if you might see fit to become my wife." Joy bubbled up inside her. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I would see fit to that." His kiss was tender, promising, filled with all the words they hadn't yet spoken but would have a lifetime to share. The next morning, Nathan Vance arrived on the eastbound stage, his worry evident in the lines of his face. When he saw Natalie waiting at the station, relief washed over him. He embraced her tightly before turning a questioning eye to the tall cowboy at her side. "Father, this is Matthew Young," Natalie said, her voice steady. "He saved my life." Nathan shook Matthew's hand firmly. "Then I owe you a debt I can never repay, sir." "No debt," Matthew replied. "Your daughter is extraordinary in her own right. She saved my friend's life with her nursing skills." Pride flickered in Nathan's eyes as he looked at his daughter. "That sounds like Natalie." He glanced between them, noting their closeness. "Perhaps we should discuss matters over breakfast?" Over eggs and coffee at the hotel, Natalie and Matthew recounted their harrowing ordeal. When they finished, Nathan sat back, studying them thoughtfully. "So," he said finally, "what are your plans now, Natalie? I assume you still wish to continue your nursing work." Natalie exchanged a glance with Matthew. "Yes, but not in Tucson. There's a need for medical care in Texas as well." Understanding dawned in Nathan's eyes. "I see." He turned to Matthew. "And your intentions toward my daughter, Mr. Young?" "Honorable, sir," Matthew replied without hesitation. "I've asked Natalie to marry me, and she's accepted." Nathan nodded slowly. "I can't say I'm surprised. The way you look at each other." He smiled faintly. "It reminds me of how I looked at her mother." He reached across the table to take Natalie's hand. "Your mother would be proud of the woman you've become, Natalie. As am I. If Mr. Young makes you happy, you have my blessing." Tears sprang to Natalie's eyes. "Thank you, Father." 2 months later, on a crisp October morning, Natalie Vance became Natalie Young in a simple ceremony at Matthew's ranch outside San Antonio. Frank Miller stood as best man, his arm still in a sling but healing well. Nathan Vance gave his daughter away, his investment in the local copper mine ensuring he would be a frequent visitor. After the ceremony, as guests celebrated in the ranch house, Matthew led his new wife to the porch. The setting sun cast long shadows across the rolling Texas landscape. "Happy?" he asked, his arm around her waist. Natalie leaned into him, savoring the moment. "More than I ever thought possible." She looked up at him. "When those outlaws took me hostage, I never imagined it would lead me here." Matthew smiled, the scar along his jaw crinkling. "Life has strange trails, Mrs. Young. I'm just grateful ours crossed." "I love you, Matthew," she said simply. "And I love you," he replied, his kiss a promise of all the years to come. From the west, A cool breeze carried the scent of rain. New life, new beginnings, a fitting omen for the journey they were starting together. What had begun in danger had blossomed into something beautiful and lasting, and neither of them would change a moment of the path that had brought them here.